The ongoing border crisis in the US-Mexico border, more precisely in Texas, has been escalating to dangerous levels, where the US federal government and the Texas government both are pivoting towards a confrontation of sorts. This in an effort to handle border security their own way. This is an excellent topic to contrast how our indigenous ancestors of the Anahuac, that is Mesoamerica, used to handle a border crisis. Yes, indigenous native nations of ancient Mexico and Central America had borders, and they also had border issues. So in this versus video, we will compare the US border crisis versus Emperor Xolotl and his way of handling border issues. This way we can learn about our past with examples of our present. I'm an anthropologist, artist, author, and direct descendant of poet King Netzahualcoyotl, and this is a versus video. So we have the US border crisis on one hand, and the border issues lived by the Chichimec Empire, more specifically by Emperor Xolotl, Xolotl Amaqui, on the other hand. The US-Mexico border crisis is an ongoing situation that has developed during the last years, in an era of highly developed technology and swift communications. Meanwhile, the border issues during the times of Emperor Xolotl happened 800 years ago, in an era where technology was pre-industrial and communications and logistics were far more difficult and challenging. What triggered the border crisis in both instances? In the case of the US-Mexico border crisis, it stems from the thousands of Mexicans crossing the border illegally. Over the years, apart from Mexicans, the border has begun to see an influx of people from other countries. Crossing illegally for the United States means entering the country without a visa and through places other than official ports of entry. The US says this makes it impossible to know who is entering and why, but in reality it is more about jobs being taken and cultural issues such as language or values. Meanwhile, the Chichimec Empire and its border problems in the year 1200s came from entire nations entering the domain, not just one, but entire nations from what is today northern Mexico and the southwestern United States, relocating into the Chichimec Empire. These migrants were crossing unchecked and unsupervised, which prompted Emperor Xolotl to establish laws so there could be order. These huge contingents of people coming from the north also had their own language, their own customs, their own values, and that worried Xolotl as well. And even though both the United States and the Chichimec Empire faced the very same immigration challenges, Emperor Xolotl came with a hands-on solution. What solution? You will be surprised. For the US, their solution relies on a physical barrier, be that a wall, border patrol, or flat-out near-impossible legal hurdles for people from Mexico and Central America to migrate into the United States or even just visit the United States. There are many in America from the left and the right who ignore these legal nuances because they are not Mexican or Central American. But it is next to impossible for any Mexican or Central American to migrate to the States. That's a fact. That's way before the Trump era, by the way. But you won't hear about this on MSNBC or Fox News. And as much as Democrats and liberal Americans want you to believe Trump and only Trump established these hurdles, that is historically incorrect. That's a reality in which the United States operates regardless of the political party that rules the White House. On the other hand, Xolotl, Emperor of the Chichimec domain, knew that any attempt to put a stop on millions of people, dozens of entire nations who were entering his domain would not only logistically be impossible, but would lead to a bigger crisis, i.e., violence, resources being diverted to protect the imperial border, and the reality of being outnumbered. So Emperor Xolotl's solution was to let them in. If, and only if, they entered in an orderly manner, and if they obeyed his special immigration laws. Wait, what? A native ruler establishing immigration policy? Yes, this did happen. Xolotl had to do this, that is, control the flow. Whatever was happening in the north was beyond the scope of his abilities to undo. So his only choice was to receive them only and only if they abide to his special laws. But one must wonder if such laws or any similar laws exist in the United States. In America, besides the physical barriers, there are also immigration laws by which the government and immigrants must abide when entering the country. But in the end, immigrants must obey the law of the land. Whatever specific laws the US has for immigrants, it has to do mostly to the conditions and manner in which they can enter into the United States territory, depending also if they are temporarily visiting the US or permanently residing. For Emperor Xolotl, his immigration laws were different and more omnipresent for immigrants. One law is that immigrants should obey to where they would be relocated by Emperor Xolotl. The emperor would allocate land to where they could live, this according to the needs of each imperial region, land availability, but also the size of the contingent. Immigrants didn't have a say in this, but rather the decree of Emperor Xolotl. In the United States, immigrants can go anywhere they want, even if that place is overpopulated. Another law of Xolotl was that all immigrants should talk and communicate in Nahuatl language, the lingua franca or common language in the empire. This would seem as a drastic or xenophobic measure if you wouldn't know that Emperor Xolotl's mother tongue wasn't actually Nahuatl language. In fact, he just learned or was learning to speak Nahuatl, and even when Nahuatl wasn't his ethnic language, he legally encouraged Nahuatl language because of a really basic reason. Because most of the people who were already living there spoke Nahuatl. Xolotl was an outsider. He was originally from the Tampico region. But even though he took control of vast kingdoms under his empire, he respected the original inhabitants, the majority. Just as the United States was previously part of the British Empire, the Chichimec Empire was previously the Toltec Empire. Just as the American people inherited English language as the common tongue, the same happened with the Chichimecs, who inherited Nahuatl as the common tongue. But the difference is that English is not the official language in the United States. In fact, America doesn't legally have an official language, not even German, which at one point was proposed to be the official language back when America was a young nation. Fun fact, most Americans are of German descent, a non-English speaking culture, but still, English is traditionally the more widely spoken language in America. For the Chichimec Empire, Nahuatl was decreed to be the official language. Xolotl encouraged, or rather forced, his court to talk in Nahuatl, and the reason was also a cultural one. For instance, in America, immigrants are not forced to certain cultural values. They are encouraged but not legally forced. Apart from some yahoos who may say you should speak English, there is no legal basis. And even when the United States government doesn't legally force newcomers to adapt to cultural values, for Emperor Xolotl, it was quite the contrary indeed. Emperor Xolotl Amaqui did force newcomers from the north to adapt to the ways and values of the people of what is today Central America, people that were already living there. This was, in fact, another of his laws, and at some point in time, there was a group who wanted to cling on to their old ways and refused to adapt to the Toltec ways that the Chichimec Empire was forcing. And at some point in time, There was a group who wanted to cling on to their old ways and refused to adapt to the Toltec ways that the Chichimec Empire was forcing immigrants to adapt to the point that there was an uprising, the Yacanish War. But aside from this war, which in reality started because of a beautiful young woman, not so much out of these immigration policies, the immigration laws of Emperor Xolotl brought stability to what could be an otherwise worst case scenario, like the one is happening in the US. Because the United States, as much as they claim they have a porous border, people are concentrating all along the border, setting conditions for a dangerous situation to rapidly deteriorate, especially in the Texas area of the border. And this ticking bomb is in both sides of the border, since the cartels control vast territories on the Mexican side, immediate to the border along the Rio Grande, like in the so-called Frontera Chica in the state of Tamaulipas. This effectively makes the Texas-Mexico border a war zone, unrecognized, by the way, by both Mexican and American governments, except for US Representative Michael McCall. So then, what makes people embark into such a perilous spot of the world? Because they can lose their lives in the hands of the US Border Patrol, Mexican cartels, or even drowned by the Rio Grande River itself that separates both nations. What compels people to migrate with their families? People wanting to enter into the United States are fleeing from a dual issue of poverty and violence. Let's take Mexico, for instance. Mexico is a failed state. Vast territories within Mexico is controlled not by the Mexican government, but by the powerful cartels. These cartels stem from the poverty and systemic corruption of Mexico, which in many cases control the social and economic life, while the inept Mexican government can't do anything to either confront the cartels or to correct the root of it all, poverty. So the majority of those fleeing Mexico are doing so for economic and peace-seeking reasons. This wasn't the case for the immigrants that migrated to the realm of Emperor Xolotl. The first difference is that there were entire nations moving into the Chichimec domain. As of today, the entirety of Mexico is not moving into the United States. The other difference is that immigrants arriving to the Chichimec Empire were fleeing climate change. A climate change event happened in what is today northern Mexico and southwestern United States. Not only the weather became harsh to live, but a significant process of desertification sprawled all over the entire region, making vast grasslands into desolate deserts. Such a changing environment forced people to flee those areas. Entire nations moved south. One of those nations were the now famous Aztecs, the Mexica Aztecs. Were these the first climate change refugees? They sure were refugees, and Emperor Xolotl received them under his terms. Xolotl saw the influx of migrants as a major issue in his government. It was a do-or-break moment for the Huaytlatuani, the High Ruler. Is this the same for the United States? The US has many issues, especially abroad, that would put its existence into risk. Events like 9/11 has proven so, although some argue that all these issues narrow down to issues in the border and how they let people in, which in fact it was a key role as to why the September 11 attacks happened in the first place. Emperor Xolotl didn't have foreign enemies attempting to harm his empire, and perhaps this was also a different reason why Emperor Xolotl engaged in a more logical way of receiving immigrants instead of making it up on the go, as the United States is sometimes compelled to do. What's better in the long run? Xolotl might wonder. What ideas might the powerful Emperor Xolotl give to the United States government? After all, Both share the same can-do attitude, stemmed from their omnipresent power. At least Xolotl saw an opportunity out of immigrants, maybe thinking as a modern-day businessman. Is it really that the age of American creativity is over? The same nation that once invented planes, cars, harnessed nuclear energy and went to the moon, and even Pluto, can't come out with an out-of-the-box solution for illegal immigration? Or are we in for a simplistic solution? It can't just be either amnesty or booting everyone out, right? There is a lack of knowledge of the more than 5,000-year-old written history of the Anahuac, that is, ancient Mexico and Central America, or Mesoamerica. The world ignores all of this knowledge, and this way, with these kind of videos, the world can learn about our indigenous ancestors. If you like ancient Mexican history, like the Aztecs, Mayans, don't forget to like and subscribe, but most importantly, pass it along. Thanks for watching.